Fortnite Ballistic has some major problems. And I'm not talking about the game-breaking bugs, the lack of communication, the untextured maps,
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the?
or any of the other problems that we can't do anything about. I'm talking about specifically Fortnite Ballistic competitive. Now, sure, there are some things we can't do anything about that are developer related in competitive as well. And I'm going to go over those, but I also want to talk about a few things that we as a community can do better to help Fortnite Ballistic survive for the long term if we want this game to survive at all. Now, keep in mind when I talk about these things, I want this to be a discussion. I do not think that my opinion is the end-all be-all, so please share your opinions in the comments of this video. But this is coming from a person who has 17 years of FPS experience, who's been a part of a bunch of small communities. I've always focused on the smaller free-to-play FPS games, and I'm seeing a lot of things happen that I've seen happen before. I want to talk about 4 key things today. 2 of them are developer related, 2 of them are community related. So let's just jump into the developer stuff first, because there's really nothing we can do about it, but still got to talk about it in case they potentially watch this video. First is the lack of competitive support from Epic. Now again, there's nothing we can really do about this, but this is something I gotta get off my chest. Without the support of Epic for these tournaments, we are going to run in a situation where there's a discoverability problem. Outside of the streams and YouTube content that people like myself create, there really is no discoverability because Epic's not really promoting anything. Typically, when there's a competitive scene in a game, you can get a lot of new eyes on the game and competitions through organizational support. Esports orgs that sign teams that get a benefit from those teams, and ultimately those players kind of spread the good word of the game through the organization. Well, there is zero incentive for organizations to actually support Fortnite Ballistic. It makes no sense for these organizations to invest anything at all. With no orgs invested in the scene, it's hard to get new eyes in the game, and it's also hard to incentivize players to practice and to have a one end-all be-all tournament that is kind of the pinnacle of a competitive season. Now, a lot of this is problems that are being created community-wise, and I'm going to get into that later. But ultimately, without Epic support, this game will die. Now, there's a little bit of Epic support through a few tournaments that are being hosted by external parties. For instance, there's the LAN happening in Europe. There's been the big tournaments that have been happening in Brazil that get Epic support. But until they actually host something, things are looking pretty grim. What's frustrating is they have the infrastructure there. With their cash cups they have for regular Fortnite, they have an infrastructure and setup that they could potentially do something with, like a cash cup for Ballistic. And even for a time, it looked like that was going to be a thing with the competitive tab added to Ballistic and things like that in leaks. But unfortunately, there's been no word. Nothing's happened. We don't even get any update news anymore. So please, Epic, if you're watching this, at least have a conversation with us about competitive cash cups. Hell, I'll even help run them. Second, we have the lack of competitive functions. Now again, aside from the game-breaking bugs that we experience and the non-textured ugly maps that don't really ever get any updates, there are other competitive functions that would be astronomically beneficial to the game that we just simply don't have. One of those things would be a custom matchmaking lobby. The creator codes are great. We get our own custom games. They're a really great basic tool. But until you can have a best of 5 where you have picks and bans for maps, people can focus on things, picks and bans for gadgets, it's going to be really hard to take it seriously as a competitive mode. Now, I'm not a developer. I don't know how difficult that would be to create, especially in Fortnite's current ecosystem. But if we're talking about actually having Fortnite Ballistic be competitive, custom lobbies are a must. It would also help for things like resetting matches. Instead of having to forfeit and surrender, which by the way, which was a great addition, because before we used to have to play the game out and then restart the game, and having to get back to the rounds that you were at before and having weird economies, you could just set the game to a certain round count, certain money count, and anything like that. Set people's gadgets a certain way. Most importantly, if a map needed to get reset, you can just be on the same map on the same side. Too often, you have someone getting momentum on, let's say, Hammerfall. The game has to get reset, and all of a sudden they get Storm Chaser. It's not a very good competitive function if you're playing a different map. So little things like that would be crucial to help the game. Even if Epic starts dragging their feet on actually having Epic-hosted tournaments, having those custom lobbies for community tournaments would be a game changer. So please, Epic, if you're listening, give us custom lobbies. Now we're going to get into the community-focused things. And these are a much larger discussion that I'm kind of narrowing down to a very short point. So I'm open to discussing this with anyone, but here's my 2 cents on the current state of the community side of Ballistic Competitive. There are far too many tournaments. There is such a thing as tournament fatigue. Now, don't get me wrong. The amount of support this community has shown to its community is incredible. I've never seen anything like it in my 20 plus years of gaming. Most of the time, communities just let games die. And in this case, the community has funded tens of thousands of dollars for tournaments. When you have too many tournaments, they just have a lot less meaning when you win one. On top of that, when you host a tournament every single day, it doesn't give teams time to practice. Even if a team elects to sit out and not play a tournament, other teams are playing tournaments, and so they can't find scrims. This is a community-focused effort that we need to take to stop having so many tournaments. I get it. Ranked is boring. No one wants to play ranked. There are far too many people in Unreal that do not deserve to be there. And that is a whole nother discussion about how we need to rehaul the rank system. That's not what we're having today. But people want to fill that void with draft tournaments and fun 2v2s and things like that, and that's just not the answer. I know it seems like the answer. In the short term, it's fun. But if we're talking about longevity for Fortnite Ballistic, people will get burnt out. People are already getting burnt out. It gives people time to practice, allows people to flesh out new players and get their roster set up. When you're playing with 5 different players every single day because certain people can't make Wednesdays and certain people can make Thursdays, you're just going to run into issues. We don't need 17 tournament organizers in North America. We can have the OCE tournaments, the EU tournaments, the Brazil tournaments, and if you want to play in the extra ones, you can. I think a draft tournament once a week is great. But there are so many people that are vying for power, thinking that they can do it better, that it's starting to become an issue. And I know it may not necessarily be from a bad place. Some people break off and start their own server because they notice some favoritism in another server and they want to do it better. And briefly touching back to a point I had made earlier, I know rank's boring, but when you're not playing tournaments, you can play 10-mans and you can play scrims. Scrims are great for the competitive players that want to get better and have a potential to finally beat Team Z. 10-mans are great for the casual players that don't want to play competitive, but they want harder opponents. Having a draft tournament once a week, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you have a draft tournament 5 times a week, as well as a tournament every single day, sometimes multiple tournaments a day, depending on the region, it's starting to become a lot. So, although it sounds counterintuitive, let's have a discussion about lowering the number of tournaments, because if we don't, this game is going to die out very quickly. Lastly, let's talk about taking competitive seriously. Now, as a person who's trying to bring coaching to the scene to help the scene get better, it's pretty disheartening to see how little people care about actually getting better. Part of it's a byproduct of having a tournament every day, but so many people believe that top teams are simply unbeatable, and that's just not the case. What you need is you need to find the right lineup, and you need practice strategy.
I mean, listen, we talking about practice. Not a game. We talking about practice.
We have a lot of insane players in this community that could absolutely reach the top. They just need to work on the right plays, how to approach things. As I mentioned earlier, people are not scrimming. And even when people do scrim, for some reason, it's not being used as an actual learning ground. People care more about winning the scrim than they do about learning. Look at any other competitive tac shooter. That is just not how it works. People do not care if they get 0-7'd, or in other cases 0-13'd. As long as they're trying stuff, figuring out what works, what doesn't. Seeing if people are better on recons than they're on impulses and things like that, you're going to gain a lot more value than just caring about winning the scrim. As a community, if we start taking the game more seriously, and we aren't forced to play a bunch of tournaments every single day, and we can focus on scrimming and practicing and getting better, I promise you competition will be more fun. It will no longer be a battle for third place. It will be a battle of, hey, maybe we can upset somebody this week. Maybe someone got sent to the lower bracket. We can win that best of one. And all of a sudden, the entire competitive scene is shook up. So if I can make a plea to the community, it's that we please take this a little bit more seriously so competitions are more fun. Epic cares more about supporting us, and organizations care more about joining the scene and promoting the game. To wrap things up, I know that it's a long shot, There is too many people who care so much about having their power in their server that they refuse to give it up. There's too many people that find ranked boring and would rather have a game be fun for 3 months and die out than have it be fun for the long term. But it is a discussion that we need to start seriously having. Because if we don't, this game at its current capacity will not be here that much longer. And I, for one, don't want that to happen. If you guys want to have a discussion, make sure to leave a comment down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.